Alright, today we are talking about Bleach, and I've got three questions lined up for today that I plan on just answering in my own random opinion. So, first question is Bleach timeless? I find this an interesting one. I always like talking about whether something's timeless or not. And in terms of Bleach, I'm kind of not sure. It might not be, actually. I feel like Bleach represents 2000s aesthetics very well. If you consider that timeless, then I suppose that's good enough. Bleach has a very distinct kind of style to it. Tite Kubo has a very distinct style to him. Uh, Something about it is this very kind of casual color scheme to it. Again, like in terms of fashion, it almost reminds me of like JoJo or something, where the way the artist draws it aesthetically just has something kind of passionate about it, something unique, something really kind of captivating about it. I really do like kind of the Bleach style, and then in terms of like the designs of the other characters, it's surprisingly minimalist. Like the Shinigami are just like black and white, black and white Japanese kimono, basically kind of inspired samurai-ish, sort of inspired feudal Japan. The Quincy's in the final arc are basically just sort of like double-breasted military uniforms in white, basically, and then the Hollow Rancor were, I don't know, sort of like white robes. Like Aizen had like a white robe. It was kind of contrasting. So like the Hollows are more like a white outfits with like black accents, and Shinigami are more like white accents with black outfits, that sort of thing. So more like a design aspect. Do I think Bleach is timeless? Well, kind of no, in the sense that I think again it kind of represents a certain era, so it's sort of dated in a way actually, but that is a point of time that for me is timeless, timeless in terms of my own sensibilities. So yeah, may as well be timeless for me, but it may not be timeless for everyone. I guess I'd put it that way. In terms of the story, is it timeless? Mm, Probably not. I mean, it has that kind of teen appeal, especially like the Soul Society arc. There's this kind of rebellious sense of like going against the establishment, if you would, and kind of like not doing what's expected of you, and this kind of reckless kind of element, going against the rules. There's a captivating element there. I guess you could say maybe it's timelessly entertaining. It's maybe the best thing I could say about it. It is very entertaining. You know, um, it is a very entertaining series, and that's one of my favorite things about it. Is just that, especially the anime is very rewatchable, high action, very fun, so on. But in terms of my question, if I had to answer it, is Bleach timeless? I'd probably say no, but that's okay. Not everything has to be timeless. All right, so that's question number one. Question number two is an interesting one. Bleach sub versus dub. So this is about the anime. And, there's plenty of different series out there where it may be a very clear-cut answer of is the sub better or is the dub better. This is, of course, English dub versus Japanese dub, right? I don't know about other dubs. But who did the... Was the Bleach dub Viz Media? Or it was like the same people who did Naruto, I believe. But nonetheless, I've watched Bleach the anime fully subbed and dubbed. I think I started dubbed, and then I watched it second subbed, and then I've just gone back and forth since. And honestly, it's a rare situation where I honestly could not tell you whether I think the sub or the dub is better. I think that they're basically of equal quality for me. Like Ichigo's Japanese voice versus his English voice Johnny Young Bosch. I think they just both do just a fantastic job. So for me, honestly, I think watch either one. This was the case back in the day. I don't know if it's the case as much now, but back in the day there was a bit of an issue finding good translations of the sub online because they would sometimes use strange terms like literal translations. So like Zompak Toe, I think they would translate as like soul stealer or something. Like they would translate everything literally or translate things in ways you wouldn't expect. So some fan translations back in the day were a little weird. I don't know if you can find like newer ones of those these days. So watching it subbed can have some issues. Although there was a benefit of watching it subbed because those fan subs would include little descriptions for the keto. Because when you're reading what the keto is, it's kind of easier to keep track because when I was watching it dubbed for the first time, it was just like, these people are just saying random numbers and random words that I have no idea what they're saying or what they mean, but they look cool, whatever they're doing. But when I watched it subbed, I could like start to figure out, oh, okay, these are like numbered, and there's like a system of it. There's like Bakudo and Hado, and like offensive one, defensive one. Because the keto, they would give you a little description of like, this is what this keto does, kind of thing. Similar thing like in Naruto subs, they would have it where when someone did like a jutsu, they would give a little kind of header, a little like description thing up top when they're translating it. And then also like they would translate it, sometimes give you the Japanese way of saying it and the sort of literal English translation of it. So they'd say like Katon Gokyaku no Jutsu or whatever is great fireball technique, or however you literally want to translate it. The dub would say fireball jutsu. But in Bleach, they would give like similar kind of descriptions for the different keto. So I just felt the keto was a lot easier to follow in the sub, but that's also because it was a fan sub. If it were an official sub, I don't know if they'd have the same kind of detail. Definitely that's the case where the manga did it best, right? Because again, with a manga, if you're ever unsure of something, you can just stop and just look at the page and just read. And with a manga, you go at your own pace, but with an anime, you're kind of brought along. Like it goes at the pace that it goes at. So I missed certain details, like with the Bakudos, like when Tessai he's doing Bakudo number 99 against Ichigo. Like back in the day when Ichigo like had his sword broken, he's just like a soul, and he has to get his powers back and so on. He's turning into a hollow. Tessai does Bakudo 99 to like seal him, but also probably is going to kill him. And I didn't know my first time even going through that was Bakudo number 99. That was something I noticed second time because I'm like, oh wow, like Bakudo 99 at like the beginning of the series, basically. That's cool. Like Kubo had more foreshadowing than you'd think. So in terms of sub and dub, like in terms of the voice actors, who does a better job, this and that. Ishida, it's kind of interesting because Ishida, this took me like time to kind of separate it, because when you first hear Ishida's voice in the sub, it's obviously Sasuke from Naruto, and he's not even doing like a different voice. It's like basically the same voice. So I remember the first time going through, every time I was hearing him talk, I just kept thinking, Sasuke? He's all Kurosaki. Like, I just can't get the thought of Sasuke out of my mind. But back when I've been watching a little bit of Bleach clips and a little bit of the new anime and so on. It's the same voice for Uryu, and now I don't have that Sasuke association when I hear his voice, because, like, to be honest, it's been a while since I watched Naruto, and I really don't care about Naruto as much now. So when I hear Uryu's voice now, I just hear how that actor is portraying the voice, and I think he does a fine job for Uryu. I think it's really fine, and though he's all like Kurosaki, like I really like that. So in the dub, he's clearly the voice of Shino from Naruto, but who cares about Shino? So it's not really a big deal. I honestly think the dub voice might be slightly more fitting in the case of Uryu, but they both do a pretty good job. Both the voices for Ichigo are basically perfect to me. The English dub voice of Rukia, for me, is fan-freaking-tastic. The way she's dubbed is so good. It's that perfect tone where it's like, she can do comic relief, she can do dramatic scenes. It's like mature, but not in like an old lady kind of way. It's is perfect. Her English voice is just perfect to me. Rukia's English voice and her Japanese voice is also perfect. That to me is perfect casting either way. I really like her dub voice though. Uh, yeah, the rest of them, yeah, like Chad. I think, well, Chad a little bit, like Renji. Renji, his dub voice is really good. Dub voice was good. Japanese voice was good. Like Mayuri Kuratsuchi, both were good. Kenpachi was a little weird because he's the same guy as Jiraiya from Naruto. And when he first shows up, he just sounds exactly like Jiraiya, but later he has like a different voice when he's fighting like Noitara and whatnot. And it was kind of like, I mean, he changed the voice. And the way he changed the voice sounds more like the Japanese one, so I'm kind of happy that he changed it, but also it's kind of jarring. Um, yeah, Kenpachi's, well, he's alright either way. It's just the Japanese one kind of was more consistent, so I kind of became more accustomed to that. But yeah, Byakuya was really good both ways. Again, they did a really good job having voices that fit the dub, but also were consistent with the Japanese that sounded similar to the way the Japanese sounds. So again, that's why it's like so close in my mind. Like it's not that different of an experience, sub versus dub. It's kind of equal quality. You know, it's very good casting either way. But like one thing you do miss watching it subbed, which is kind of unique to Bleach, but it's something you see in other series as well, is that the way they refer to the characters in Japanese is not the same as they do in the dub. This is something that's different. So, like I said, Uryu um, always refers to Ichigo in Japanese as Kurosaki. And then, like, there are certain honorifics that are used. Like, I don't think Ichigo really uses honorifics. Like, he always says Inoue, he says Ishida, he says Chadel, and he says Rukia. But I don't think Ichigo in the Japanese uses honorifics, but like Orihime always uses honorifics, right? Of course she does because she's polite, right? So, and then like Rukia, what was cool is like she doesn't use honorifics with Ichigo because she's kind of like, well, you know, with Ichigo she's more rough around the edges, but then like obviously in the Soul Society, she's very formal and uses the proper titles for everyone and so on. So that kind of like represents her kind of double life and so on, which that's kind of present in the dub. But again, the honorifics really kind of highlight it in a way that you don't get in English. So that's one of those elements where it's more of a translation thing, not necessarily like a dub thing in the sense of how the actors perform, but it's how the script is and so on. And the way they did it in the dub is fine. Like Ichigo will just say Orihime, they'll just say Uryu, rather than saying Ishida and Inoue. They could have done it where they keep saying last names, but they just decide to go first names, and that's how it is in the dub, and it's fine. It's different. So that's an element that's like lost in translation, but it's not that significant. But it's something you will notice. If you start watching it dubbed and then you go to the sub, and you're really used to the dub, you'll notice like all these different ways that they refer to each other. Because like Inoue's all like, "Oh, Kurosaki-kun," you know, rather than just saying Ichigo. So it's different, but not that big of a thing. Depends on interpretation. Um, and my third topic, which will be my final topic for this session, is classic Bleach is best Bleach. And obviously this is a matter of opinion, but yeah, no. Soul Society arc and Substitute arc, as it's now called. I mean, most, if not everyone, agrees those are the best portions of Bleach. But people forget about, things that went on in those arcs. Like, there's more foreshadowing than you think. Like the Menos Grande shows up, which first off, like, those aren't even described until much later what those even are. But they just pop out, and then it does a Sero, and then Ichigo like reflects the Sero back. So it's like that's another one. And then I mentioned before Bakudo 99 with Tessai. And then, like, Urahara, like, his whole deal is very mysterious. Like, he's clearly a former Shinigami. We learn later the context of that, and the backstory for the Quincy are established, even though that's not going to be relevant until hundreds of chapters later. Obviously, we needed that deal for earlier, but still, like that the way that the substitute arc establishes the world of Bleach and these kind of fundamentals and how it carries on throughout the story, it's just really good because whether Kubo had these things planned or not, he established enough to give you the impression that he did have these things planned. Like, this is another subject entirely, but like Ichigo actually being like a Quincy later on and so on. That that twist totally like freaked me out and blew my mind. It kind of pissed me off the first time I heard it, but now I look back and I'm like, that was actually kind of genius because the idea that Masaki had powers and so on makes a lot of sense because, where did Ichigo get his powers and so on? I mean, we thought he was a Shinigami, and that was believable because his father was a Shinigami, and then there was this whole thing of he awakened the Hollow powers in the Urahara training. That was fully believable, and I did believe that for a long time, which is hard. It was hard for me to let go of it. But the way it recontextualizes scenes from the beginning of the series while also like perfectly lining up, and it kind of makes the beginning of the series even more better. Just makes it feel even more like cleanly put together. I don't know how well it was thought out, but it just feels well thought out, which is really all you need. Because I mean, you can have a story like Berserk, which wasn't planned at all, but it's just written so cleanly and well that whether it was planned or not, it just lines up. And so there's that element of it where I think the substitute arc establishes Bleach's world so well. And then you go into the Soul Society arc where, I mean, that arc is just a mile a minute, and all these epic fights. I mean, that really, a lot of them really still are the best fights in the series. Ichigo Kenpachi, Ichigo Byakuya, Ichigo getting his Bankai. That was just such a satisfying moment. The Hollow breaking in, the Aizen twist was god tier. I never expected that coming. My first time. It's still just such a joy to go through. Even if you know everything that's coming, you'll see things that you didn't think Kubo actually had there. It's like, again, I feel like Kubo knew quite a bit going in, like, which I wouldn't have. Again, Bleach is kind of seen as lowbrow a lot of times, but like Kubo, I think knew more than we give him credit for in that beginning portion, or at least it feels that way. I mean, there's even that whole thing in the manga where like there's an early drawing of Shinji in one of the early chapters, so he was aware of that as well. So things feel really planned out very, very well early on, up until the Ironclar arc. And the Ironclar arc, well, it's still good, but especially the ending, it's like really rough around the edges. Feels like by the time of like the Karakura Showdown War, Kubo maybe stopped. Well, I don't know. I mean, again, like the story's well rounded, but in a weird way. Like when Aizen was like, "I've known about you since before you were even born." I remember like first time going through that, I thought that was like, I remember being like, "Oh, that's bullshit." That's. But turns out from that flashback we get in the Thousand Year Blood War, no, actually, that's that's actually how it was. So I was completely shocked by that. So yeah, no, that flashback is one of those things where it's like reading the manga the first time, I couldn't believe it, but now that I look back, it's actually surprisingly well rounded. But again, classic Bleach. That's what we're talking about. No, it holds up so well in terms of entertainment value, in terms of like setting up the story. It's one of the best setup arcs like I've ever seen. Setting up the world, setting up the rules, setting up these subtle elements of backstory that Kubo later develops. It feels like it's all there, and that's one of those things with like Bleach, where like Bleach kind of is a small world. Like you could say the world building is like, some people criticize that, they say it's poor world building, but like Bleach is a very compact world, and part of the advantage of that is it feels like Kubo had these things and understood these things in terms of all the factions in play right from the beginning. Again, the fact that he had the concept of Shinji, he had the concept of Vizards, had the concept of what the Ironclar would be in that sense, or at least where that was going. Shinigami, Quincy, Hollow, all these things are established very quickly in the story and in a very, again, interesting but way that flows very well. So again, Bleach is very compact, and that's something I really like about it compared to something like One Piece. One Piece is so freaking long, and there's so many loose ends of what does this mean and this theory here, and I don't know what's going on, and I'm hyped for this and that, and that's fine. But again, Bleach, part of what makes it so rewatchable for me is again that compact element, that the way in which it just sets up all these factions and elements of the verse and just balances them very well, in my opinion. This is another aspect of Bleach, but like Bleach doesn't have like you would think, okay, the Hollows are evil, or the Quincy are evil, or whatever. It's like people talk about the Shinigami being evil. Really, no one is good or evil in Bleach. Sometimes there are antagonists, but it's very good at like not framing the factions in stereotypically evil ways. You just have different factions in Bleach, and you know we're on different sides at different times and so on, and they're just different arcs that set up these different fights. And that's really the point of the story, is just to facilitate epic fights. But it's very good in that way, in which it kind of paints a morally gray aspect to the different factions of the verse. That's a very good aspect as well. And again, that's something you kind of have from the very beginning of the series, and it just kind of expands on that in context. So yeah, Bleach has these elements that I really like about it. Again, I could nitpick it to death, but I'm a fan of Bleach. Like I'm just a fan, and I forgive these things because again I find it entertaining. And at the end of the day, like if you don't care about Bleach, then you moved on. You moved on a while ago. There's really no reason to care. So for me personally, I just take what I enjoy out of it. And yeah, those are my subjects for today. So with that said, Spaghetti King, I love you all, and hope to talk again. Thank you.